You're listening to Dear Strategy, where we answer all of your questions on product and business strategy. And now, here's your host, Bob Caparelli.
Welcome to another episode of Dear Strategy. We answer all of your questions about product and business strategy. Real questions from real people in real companies, just like yours. Welcome back, strategy creators, to episode 92. Very special episode this week, just because it's such a great topic. I'm going to give you a listicle in podcast form. And you'll understand what I mean in just a minute. But I'll tell you what, I don't have time for big promotions in the beginning and long introductions. So I'm just going to tell you, you all know this podcast is sponsored by the company that I own and founded, Strategy Generation Company. Go out to strategygeneration.com, take a look at what we have to offer, support the show, support the company, and you'll find a wealth of resources on strategy out there. So please go do that. And with that, I'm going to get right to today's questions because I'm so excited about sharing this one with you. So here it is. Dear Strategy, what are some product strategy pitfalls to avoid? This is just a great question because we often get questions on this show about, tools and terminology and, what does this mean? What does that mean? How do I approach this? How do I approach that? But I can't recall of a time when we've actually had a question like this, which is like, what things should I not be doing, right? Which of course we all know strategy is all about, things that you shouldn't be doing as much as things that you should be doing. So I really love this approach. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give 5 things that you should avoid, right? When putting together a product strategy. So the 5 pitfalls. And I'm going to start with the first and most obvious one, which is not having a strategy at all, right? So the one thing you want to avoid if you are a product manager in charge of a product line, portfolio, or anything else is not having a strategy. And now that sounds like, wow, that's an obvious one. That's ridiculous. But it's not ridiculous at all, because I would tell you that although most of the companies that I have worked directly for as a product manager, strategist, business lead, or whatever else, had formal product strategies, meaning on an annual basis, we had to get in front of the, executives, the CEO, the board, whoever, and update our strategic plan at a product line level and business level and all those different things. Even though that's the environment that I come from, on the teaching and consulting side, which I've been doing for the last 6-7 years, I would say relatively few companies that I work with have that process formalized. Which is why I started Strategy Generation Company, right? Because I want to help more companies put together formal strategies. The difference, by the way, is night and day, especially at the product line level. When you are not requiring product managers to have product line strategies in a formal way, the reality is the day-to-day firefighting of the role takes over, and the product strategy always goes by the wayside, which means there might be some plan that's residing in the back of the head somewhere, but it's not formalized, it's not socialized, it's not bought in on, investments are not well laid out, and everything is reactive. And the difference between a company like that and a company that has a formal strategic plan or a strategy process at the product level, it's night and day. So that's my first thing, is make sure that you have that process. And if your company doesn't have a process where they are requiring product managers to report product strategy back to their executives on an annual basis, then do it yourself, okay? Get your cross-functional team together, get your immediate team together, and make sure that you refresh your strategy at least once a year. So that's one. The second pitfall that I would say that you should avoid in doing a product strategy is overanalyzing. Now, we all hear, overanalysis, analysis paralysis, all those different cliches. And I am big on analysis. If you look at our strategy generation framework, you'll see that analysis is the first part of it, right? It's 3 cycles in our framework: analysis, planning, and execution. Analysis is huge. And analysis includes looking at your customers, looking at your industry and competitors, looking at your company and analyzing all of the different dynamics to understand what the problems are that need to be solved through your strategy. So that's the essence of what your analysis is. The reason that I say over-analysis could be a pitfall is because some people, if they don't have all of the information that they require, that they need, right? then they're afraid to move to the planning step. And that is a mistake. So let's say you're doing competitive analysis and you have 10 competitors and you really could only get really good information on 3 of them. And the other, 7, you don't have publicly available information. It's stuff that's not readily accessible. So if those dynamics exist, you might say, well, if I can't, analyze them, then I really can't put a plan together. And that's just wrong. Your analysis stage is always going to be some combination of data that you have, data that you get, and data that doesn't exist or that you don't have access to. And that last part, you're going to have to fill in the blanks. So just like any good equation, right? You need to have enough information so that you can try to kind of extrapolate the rest of it. And what you're going to do in a good strategy process is have some magical balance between data and intuition, right? And if you have enough data, then your intuition is going to be more accurate. If you don't have enough data at all, then your intuition is going to be less accurate. But there's that balance. Just don't be afraid to fill in the gaps with intuition, right? And that's really the second thing that you need to be concerned with. Okay, the third pitfall to avoid in product strategy is don't assume that your strategies will be free. What I mean by that is any single strategy that I've seen that's worth anything is going to require some level of investment to make it happen. And believe it or not, even in a formal strategic planning process, I see this step left out a lot. So people will definitely, understand what the goals and objectives are. They put together strategic initiatives and say, this is what we want to do to achieve those goals. But then they fall short of saying, this is how much it's going to cost. And without looking at that investment, the rest of the strategy is a dream. A lot of people say that strategy fails in execution. We'll get to that in a second. But my experience is that strategy fails in execution because you didn't account for the investment, right? And of course, everybody wants to achieve all of their goals without spending any extra money, but that just is not going to happen. So make sure that an integral part of your plan is putting together an investment roadmap. High level estimate. Go back to episode 91, the last episode we did, if you want to learn more about that process and this process of road mapping, but definitely you need to account for your investments. Okay. The fourth pitfall that I see and that you want to avoid is when you're presenting your strategic plan to your leaders, don't present a strategy that's what you think they want to hear. Okay. Meaning if you go in with a preconceived notion of what your company wants or doesn't want, or what your leaders will or won't accept, you're limiting yourself right out of the gate. I can tell you what most leaders and executives want in companies is for you to know your business well enough to put together your strategy that makes sense, right? That's what they want. If you go in thinking that, hey, they won't support this or they won't support that, or a lot of times we think, well, they grew up on this product line, so, they will never let us kill this part of the product or do this to the product or do that to the product. Like, you're just limiting yourself and you're probably wrong. Most leaders will accept just about anything as long as it's backed up with good information, good homework, and a good knowledge of the market. If you display the knowledge of what you're talking about, you'll be listened to. Now, you won't always be agreed with, but you'll rarely be kicked out of the room. Okay. So most people will go in, if they go in and tell their bosses what they think they want to hear, they do it out of fear. Don't play that game. Strategy is about taking some risks. It's about taking control of your product line as if you were the only business owner. And as a result, put in the plan that you think makes sense based on the best knowledge you have of the marketplace, and don't be afraid. Okay. Okay. So the fifth and final pitfall that I would say to avoid, and there's probably 20 more that I can say, but I'm going to limit it to 5 for this podcast, is it is in execution, right? So it's this idea of not executing your strategy, but it's not what you think, I'll say, because a lot of people say that, again, strategy fails in execution. I've already said that I believe most strategies fail because the execution wasn't properly accounted for from a standpoint of investment. But there's actually another thing that causes strategies not to be executed, and that is they're not properly communicated or socialized. Okay. So as a strategy owner, your job now, once the strategy is approved by your leadership, is to make sure that you now communicate that strategy to the rest of the company, the rest of the organization, everyone else who's going to have to help you execute that strategy. And a lot of times, especially if we have a formal strategy process in place that requires us to communicate the strategy to leaders, we stop there, okay? So we're done. We got past the leaders. They accept the strategy, and now I have approval to go make it happen. Well, guess what? The only way you're going to make it happen is if the rest of the organization understands that strategy as well. So what I always like to suggest is once you get approval from your leaders, now go ahead and plan a roadshow, right? Get out to your sales force and your marketing people and your operations and your plants and your finance people, whoever else. Get your groups together and present your plan to them the same way you did to your executives. Get their feedback, get their buy-in, and they will help you to execute your strategy. Especially in a larger company or medium-sized company, you cannot execute your strategy alone. It just will not work. You need your team around you, so you have to have their buy-in and support. So those are the 5 things. I'll repeat them again. The pitfalls that you want to avoid. Number 1 is not having a strategy to begin with. Number 2 is overanalyzing, or more appropriately, being afraid to fill in what you don't know with your intuition. Number 3 is not accounting for the fact that your strategy is going to cost money and you have to account for the investments within the confines of your plan. Number 4 is in not telling people what you really want to have happen. In other words, telling your leaders what you think they want to hear. And number 5 is not executing through proper communication. So not communicating your plan to the rest of the team that's going to help you execute your strategy. So those are the 5 things that I would avoid. And they're based on things that I see, unfortunately, too many people not avoiding. So you really want to be aware of that and be careful. And if you follow these 5 things, or, avoid these 5 things, I should say, you're going to have a good plan. So hopefully that's helpful. Hopefully you got something out of this. And if you did, go tell us about it. Give us a review. Go out to your podcast aggregator of choice, preferably iTunes or Apple Podcasts if you can, and give us a review. Tell other people about the show. Help us get more subscribers and help other people find the same information that hopefully you're finding valuable right now. While you're doing all that, don't forget to make time for the plan. We'll see you back here on another episode of Dear Strategy. Thanks for joining.
Thank you for listening to Dear Strategy with Bob Caparelli. To learn more or to submit a question to be featured on our show, please visit us at dearstrategy.net.